Good morning, everyone. How are we all doing? Good. You wondering what this is? It's a light. No, this is the very... Thank you. This is the very latest in wireless LAN monitoring technology. It is, but more about that later. Now I wonder if I show you, whoa, can't even catch it. It's gone. Magic. If I show you this tiny little sensor, okay, and I told you that this sensor costing, I don't know how much it is, maybe about 60 euros, could save your company 31,000 euros a year, what would you think? And also make you a hero. Good? Can you get one? Sold. So again, I'm going to tell you how a little bit later on. But first of all, before we get there, I want to talk to you about fear. I don't know what you think. Now, I've wrote fear in a bit scary font. I do admit that. But what do you think about fear? Is fear good or is it bad? What do we think? You see, fear can be healthy. It really can be. It's programmed into our nervous system and it gives you survival techniques to keep you safe. That's what fear can do. But fear is unhealthy when it makes you overcautious. When fear prevents you from doing things which you would normally enjoy doing. So you see, fear can be healthy. It can be unhealthy. In fact, fear can be really debilitating, stop you reaching your potential, stop you doing things that normally you may want to do. But when fear triggers survival instinct, gets your adrenaline going, well, that's when you can start to achieve things you thought maybe you never could do. Okay? Now, the thing with fear is a lot of fears are actually irrational. Do you know that? A lot of fears are actually things, people fear things which they really don't need to be scared about at all. I've got a few examples for you. Nomophobia. Now, this is a fear which most teenagers in this world suffer from really badly. But I think it's really irrational. Okay, this is the fear of being without your mobile phone. All of my children definitely have this fear. And, you know, taught to my eldest son, it would be his biggest nightmare, I think. How about this, then? Plutophobia. Now, this is a phobia which I think could really hold you back. Unless you're Alan Blake with your cryptocurrency, because this is the fear of money. I generally think that's not a great thing to fear in life, but some people do. What about this one then? Ablutophobia. Now, I really hope no one here has ablutophobia, because ablutophobia is the fear of bathing or washing. And if you're sat next to someone who has ablutophobia today, I'm really apologise. Maybe go and sit somewhere else. And another one I really hope no one here has is vetstophobia. Anyone here suffer from vetstophobia? Not that you're willing to admit. Okay. Vetstophobia is the fear of clothes. That's right. So please do keep your clothes on today. We'd appreciate that. And probably, you know, my favourite phobia, I'm presuming you all have a favourite phobia, must be this one. Okay, I'm going to give it a go. It's hippopotamus strosus cripidelliophobia. It's the longest word in the English dictionary, and it is the fear of long words. you'd just be scared of your own diagnosis, wouldn't you? It would be terrible. So, I don't know what you guys think about facing your own fears. Do you know what Room 101 is? Room 101 is from a book by George Orwell, 1984, and it was a torture chamber where prisoners were put to face their greatest fear or greatest phobia. And it was meant to be a way of breaking down their resistance to the government of the time. But what do you think about facing your own fears? Is that something you're prepared to do? You see, if your fears cause you to freeze, cause you not to do anything, then actually I think it's quite a good thing to try and face your fears. And this morning, I want you to face potentially a fear with me. Okay? It won't be a fear for everyone in this room, but maybe for some of you. And this is it. Do any of these words scare you?
Yes. Oh, yes.
All of them scare Keith. These are words which it's amazing when I talk to people about network automation. I'm always amazed how many people go, oh, that's not for me. It's not for me. I don't want to do network automation. But in a world of software-defined networking, of cloud-based management systems, can we really ignore network automation and integration? Is it something we really can today? I know I often tell people, I say, as a network engineer today, you need to start learning how to do API calls. You need to start to learn Python. And the amount of people who still come up to me and go, yeah, I'm not a programmer, I'll leave that to other people. Oh, I'm too old for it. Okay? Well, this is what I want to say to you today. If you're that person today sat in a room that goes, this just is scary, okay? And I don't want to do it. What I want to say to you today is it's not. It's easy, okay? And I want to try and prove to you that it's easy today. And that you don't need to be a big programmer to do API and automation. That is what I'm going to try and do today. Now, believe it or not, making an API call is as easy as going to a web browser and putting in www.google.com and getting a Google web page. We all know what happens, don't we, when you go to a web page and you put in google.com. I hope you do. I hope we're network engineers today. I hope we know that when we do that, from a protocol point of view, we're going to have our machine will do a HTTP GET request to a web server, Google, and it'll receive the web page as a HTTP response. And that web page will be displayed in our browser. Simple. What about when we fill out a form on the internet? See, when we fill out a form, we're not just reading information from a web server, we're sending information, aren't we? And how does that work? Well, we make another HTTP request, but this time it's a post. We're writing some information to a web server, and we're going to get a response back saying, yes, I've received it. API calls are just that. We read and write data using HTTP requests from web servers. So if you can use the internet, you can do API calls. But I want to take even one step further. I just wonder who's used Mist here? Okay. What about Meraki? Anyone use Meraki? So quite a lot of people have used at least one of these systems, and there's other cloud-based Wi-Fi systems you might have used. Did you know that when you're in the Mist UI and you click something, click on, I don't know, switches there, or click on access points, you're making an API call? You are. So if you've used Mist, you've made an API call. Was it that scary? It wasn't, was it? That is how easy it is to make an API call. So you've maybe even made them without even knowing you've made them. That's how easy this is. I hope I'm convincing you. Now, to get into some detail, I'm going to talk to you about the three sort of most common APIs that they are. I want to tell you what they are. And then we'll concentrate a little bit just on one this morning. But the three sort of common APIs are RESTful APIs, WebSockets, and webhooks. Now, RESTful APIs are the ones we're going to focus on the most today. They are literally just making HTTP calls and getting a response back. That's all it is. They are data-driven. What do I mean by data-driven? Well, they're all about reading data, or writing data, or deleting data. Just like when I browse to a web page, I'm reading data, I'm saying, give me this web page, and it comes back. Or when I'm filling in a web form, I'm writing some data. That's what RESTful APIs are all about. It's all about getting some data and either reading it, writing some data, we can update some data, or we can delete it. That's as simple as it is. Now that data, we talk about REST APIs being resource-based, and because the data is stored in a resource, and a resource is just a collection of data. That's how you can think of it. So if we're thinking about a wireless network management system, what might be a resource? Well, it might be your wireless LAN configuration, your wireless LAN profile, with your SSID, your pre-shared key, what frequency is it going to be on, and that is a collection of data, and that data, that resource, is going to be stored at some location, some URL, that I can say, give me that data, or I can maybe write some new data. That's all we're doing with REST API. It's a data-driven API. And it's a client-to-server one. So just like we do with a web browser, that's client-to-server. We launch our web browser, we make a request, we get a response back. That's what we're doing with RESTful APIs. And we talk about something called the CRUD operations, which we'll talk about, but create, read, update, and delete. I'll come back to those in a little bit. But that's the sort of thing we're talking about with RESTful APIs. Very easy, and we do it all through the HTTP protocol, all through requests, HTTP requests, and getting a HTTP response back. Well, I'm hoping that isn't sounding too scary yet. Let me tell you about two of the other API calls as well. There's something called, another API is a WebSocket API. Now a WebSocket API, in fact a WebSocket and webhook, the other two APIs on this slide, are both what we call event-driven. The thing that triggers data being sent is an event happening. Some event happens and data is transferred. Now the first one of these, WebSockets, it is still client to server. I make a connection to some web server, and then I say, I would like to subscribe to these events. So let's say I connect to my wireless LAN system. Let's say that is my web server, connecting to Mist or Meraki or whichever system it is. I connect to it, and I might say, I want to subscribe to an event which says, gives me information about every client that associates. Then when a client associates, that's the event that triggers it to send me some data. And it might send me the MAC address and the time it associated, whatever information I want. Or maybe I'm building a location-based system. And the data I want is every time a location engine computes an XY coordinate, I want it to send me those XY coordinates. So I can then plot them on a map and show devices moving about. And that's all there is to it. Now, WebSocket is, as I say, it's client to server. So I, as a client, had to initiate a connection. We then open what's called a WebSocket. That's a two-directional communication path. And then it will send me data until I close down that WebSocket. Another event-driven method is something called webhooks. Now, webhooks is more server to server. This is something if you want to have something running for longer than just a WebSockets connection. And this is often called the reverse API, or we often call it the web callback API. Because instead of the client initiating the connection, the system that you're getting data for initiates the connection. So I could, and it will make a connection to my own web server. So you have to have a public-facing web server. And you might say, okay, let's say I'm building some sort of, we've talked about location services. Let's say I'm building a location service, and I programmed the system, maybe it's Mist, or maybe it's another cloud vendor, to every time you compute an XY coordinate for a BLE device that we're tracking, send me the coordinates. And that event triggers it to make a connection to my web server, send the coordinates, disconnect. And that's what we get about webhooks. So webhooks tend to be server to server. And they're the three most common types of APIs you're going to get. Now, to keep things simple this morning, I'm going to show you an example. I've got a bit of a live demo, which we'll do at the end, which will use all of these API calls in one demo, which might be a bit crazy, but we'll see if it works. But I'm going to focus just on RESTful APIs, because I think they're probably initially the most useful if you're going to get started in APIs. So I want to explain a little bit more about how RESTful APIs work, to really try and demystify this for you. So RESTful APIs, as I say, make HTTP requests. And they're going to use one of 4 HTTP methods generally. A GET. And a GET is, I want to get some data, I want to read some data. Okay? And you'll send that in a HTTP web request, and you'll get back a response. And that response will have some data, a payload in it, which is the data you've wanted to get. Simple. You can also use a post if I want to create a new piece of data. So maybe I'm going to say, give me information about all my wireless LANs. And then I'll get information on my wireless LANs. Then I want to write and create a new wireless LAN, so I'd use a post. Create me this new wireless LAN, and I send some data to the web server. But what if I've got an existing wireless LAN, and I don't want to create a new one, I just want to change some information. Maybe it's 2, 4, and 5 gig at the moment, I want to make it 5 gig only. Well, I use a put, and a put is to update an existing resource and an existing set of data. And then we can delete a full resource through the delete HTTP request. Now, this data that we're talking about reading and writing generally has a format, and in a lot of API calls, that format is JSON. I'm going to show you what JSON is in a minute, because I don't want you to be scared of JSON either. It's really, really easy. Okay? But let's just think about these 4 operations for a second. You'll often hear this term CRUD. It's not a very pleasant term, but what it means is create, read, update, and delete. These are the operations we often do through RESTful APIs. To create data, we use a post. So I want to create a new wireless network. Think of it like that. I'm going to send a post command, and that's going to create a new resource, a new wireless LAN. Then I want to read. I use a GET, a HTTP GET. And using a GET, I can read a full resource, which again might be information about my wireless LANs. I'm going to show you this as well in a little bit so you can actually see it in practice. Put would update some information within a wireless LAN. And delete, I could delete the wireless LAN of the system. So they're just some examples of how we might use these 4 operations. So how do we make a RESTful API call? I want you all to be able to make a RESTful API call by the end of this session. Okay? So what do you need? Well, you need some credentials for the system you're making an API call to. Just like when I access my Mist dashboard, I've got to log in, don't I, with your username and password. You've got credentials that allow you to make changes to data, read data. So you've got to provide your credentials. In API calls, we often do that through a special number or something called a token. Okay? And it's a long string. But it's basically a long string associated with your account. So when we talk about API tokens, they're not the sort of things you share around. It's the same as a password. It's your unique credentials on that system. So that's one thing you need. You need some unique credentials. That's your authorization token. You also need to tell the HTTP request what's the format of your data. And in the examples I'm going to show, we're using JSON. So you tell it application/JSON. Okay? You tell it what the format of the data is, and then you need a URL where its data lives. We call it an API endpoint. Again, don't be scared by these terms. It's just a URL. That's all it is. It's a URL where that data lives that we want to read or write. Okay? And that's all we need. They're the 3 bits of information we need. So where do we get them? Well, when you have a system that supports APIs, they will look in their documentation, but they will have a method for getting it. So for example, this is CloudShark, which is, if you've not used CloudShark, then you will be, it's an online, basically, packet analyzer. Think of Wireshark in the cloud, okay? And if you come into my deep dive, I've only just managed to secure this, but everyone coming to my deep dive will be getting 6 months free access to CloudShark. You can swap. No, I've sort of changed that. That's not my personal API token. But you log on to CloudShark, you can go to my account, you can say API tokens, and it tells you your token. Okay? It's quite simple to get it. It's normally somewhere in your account information. Now, every system's going to have a different way of accessing your API token, but there's a way of doing it. And then I can get that API token, and that then allows me to make API calls. So you get your API token from your account on the system you're accessing. Quite easy. First thing you need. The other thing I said was you need to understand the format of the data. And we're typically, with RESTful APIs, are going to use JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. It's not difficult. Even if you've never seen JSON before, you can probably tell what data I'm storing on my screen there. It's my name. First name Peter, last name Mackenzie. JSON is fairly human readable. JSON is always surrounded by little curly brackets, and it often involves a list of what we call key value pairs. Key value pairs is just a key and a value, or you could think of almost like a field name and a field value. So we've got a key, first name, and that's in quotes, colon, the value Peter. And it's in quotes because it's a string. If it was a number, I would just write a number. And then comma, and then the next key value pair I'm storing, last name, colon, Mackenzie. Simple? Great, you all understand JSON now. See? It's not scary, is it? It's really simple. So that's JSON for you, and that's all we're saying. We're storing this data in a JSON object. And it's quite readable. The next thing that we're going to need to do is get that URL that we need to get to. And systems that have API calls generally have some API documentation. And you go, that's scary, API documentation. All it is normally is a list of URLs. So it just tells you these URLs where your data is stored. So this is an example of Meraki documentation. Quite liked it. It's documentation. It's quite clear. But look, get network wireless SSIDs. If I want to do that, there's the URL. And I can copy that and make that call. Don't need to write complex code. It tells me the URL. So again, it's just a matter of going to the documentation, finding the thing you want. And it's even got an example, you'll possibly notice down at the bottom of the screen here, of what the data looks like that you're going to get back. And it's that JSON data, and it probably, if you can see, it's quite easy. Name, colon, my SSID. Enable, true. So this wireless network is enabled. It's called my SSID. And it's fairly easy to read. This isn't complex stuff, okay? And that is all we need to make an API call. Okay, time to talk about some actual applications for making API calls and show you some. Now, I wonder how many people can relate to this situation, how many parents we've got. Thought I would give you a parenting lesson this morning, especially if you've got teenagers, and this seems anything like familiar. For something happens to children when they become teenagers, I'm sorry for those with young children, but they stop listening to you. They go up to their bedrooms, and that's it. You can call up, tea's ready, can you come down? Nothing. You just don't hear anything back. They've got the headphones on, they won't talk to you. Well, I've got the solution. You disable their Wi-Fi. Honestly, they come downstairs really, really quickly when you disable their Wi-Fi. Within literally seconds normally. My Wi-Fi's not working. Great, yeah, tea's ready, can you sit down? Or, oh no, is it not? Or it'll be working against once you tidy your room. Brilliant. See, 101 Parenting by Peter Mackenzie. So how do I do that in my house? Well, let me show you. I'm not going to lie, I've got Mist in my house, okay? And inside Mist, you can do something called policies. We're just going to go to my house. It's called Mackenzie Wi-Fi. Now, policies control what wireless users can and can't do. I've got 3 children. Love my children, Luke, Joshua, and Anna. You can see their names on here. They're all greyed out because I don't have these rules enabled. But what do these rules say? Luke is not allowed access to all resources. Okay, Anna is not allowed access to all resources. Joshua is not allowed access to all resources. That is those rules. So if I want to kick them off the wireless network, I can literally come in here, I can click enable, click save, and they're off the wireless network. But when I'm trying to get them down from T, do I really want to go to my laptop and do that? No. Do you know what I want to do? I want to take out my phone, and I want to go, hey Siri, disable Luke's internet. Oh, it didn't capture me talking. Let's try that again. Hey Siri, disable Luke's internet. Okay. It said okay. Some of you will have heard if you're close by. Let's refresh this page and see if it's done anything. And now this policy here, can you see it's gone grey? Dark grey? It's now been enabled. Luke now can't access the internet. I'm not going to be very popular if he knows I'm giving this demo again. He gets really cross. Every time I do this demo, he gets so cross with me. It is unbelievable. So let's just fix that for him. Hey Siri, enable Luke's internet. That's done. Great. And Luke's now back on the internet. Good? Now, was that difficult to do? No. I want to show you exactly how I did that. It wasn't hard at all. I didn't even go to the Mist API documentation to do this. Amazing. I just used a bit of copy and paste. Can everybody copy and paste here? Brilliant. That's all you need, honestly. Let me show you. Inside a lot of web browsers, and I'm using Chrome here, they have tools where you can see the API calls being made in the web browser. So I'm just going to go in here, and I'm going to go to I'm going to go to more tools, and I'm going to go to developer tools, okay? That's where it is in Chrome. And that's going to bring up a little panel at the side of my web browser. Now, I've actually put a filter in here called API-mist.com just so I don't see every single web call that's made. I only want to see the ones going to the Mist API. But when I click things in here, so let's just go back to, you will see lots of calls being made, okay? So what I want to do is I want to find out what call is going to be made that does the job I want to do. So we're going to go back to policy, and I am going to, what I want to do is I want to enable that rule, and when I click save, I want to know what it does. So I'm going to clear all previous entries. So I've cleared my thing, and I'm now just going to click save. Okay? And there's 3 things I can see. Now, the one I want is, it did a get so it could update the screen, but the one I want is a put, the one that's writing, changing some data. And I can see here there's a put, and look at this. That's my URL. Okay? And it's got my site ID, it's got my policy ID, it's got all the information I need. So I'm literally going to copy that and put it somewhere. Put it into, I normally use Notes because I near on my phone, and I'm about to paste it into my phone. Okay? So I'm going to copy that, and then if I look at the payload, this is what it sent. And the thing I was interested in was it's enable equals true. That's the data I need to write. Okay? I need to say enabled equals true. I want to enable the rule. Just before my son gets really cross with me, I will just disable this rule. But let me share my phone screen with you and show you how that translates. We'll at least try to anyway. Oh yeah, there we go. So on the phone, I use something called shortcuts. It's there on every iPhone. And any shortcut you have, you can basically use that as a command on Siri with the name of the shortcut. That just works by default. So you can see I've got one called Enable Luke's Internet and Disable Luke's Internet. You should be able to see those on the screen. Let's have a look at what it does. I just copied that URL, that same text that I've just copied from the browser and pasted it into that get contents. And then I set, can you see enabled equals false there? And then I just said enabled false. That was it. I had to put my API key into the headers, which is in there, and I had to say the content was application JSON. But apart from that, that's it. That's how easy it is. Is that hard? Copy something out of a web browser, paste it into your phone. That's how easy it is to do API calls. Do I need to write any code? No. So API calls are easy. I'm hopefully going to convince you all of this by the end. That is my aim. Now, I want to show you, if you want to just play about with API calls, maybe you've never done it before. You now know how to get one out of a web browser. What could you do with that information? Well, let me introduce you to a tool which I think is fantastic called Postman. Now, Postman is a tool, you can do it in a web browser, you can download a desktop version, it's cross-platform, you can use it on Windows, you can use it on Mac, and it allows you to make API calls. So you can copy and paste URLs out of documentation into Postman, or you can copy them out of browsers, and you literally just, it's like got an address bar like a web browser does, so I can paste it in, I can choose whether it's a get, a post, a put, a delete, and then I can click send. So, and a lot of systems that have API calls actually have Postman libraries. Now, what's a Postman library? Well, instead of you having to look in the documentation, they put all the API calls into Postman already for you. You just download their Postman library, and you've got all the documentation in Postman. So you don't even need to go to the documentation to look. That's what Mist have. Mist have all its documentation, a Mist API. And look at this. This is all the API calls I could ever want to do. So I don't even need to look up the documentation. And it's all here. So on wireless lens, get site wireless lens. That's what I've currently got. It puts a URL in there for me. I can click send. And it's pulled a list of my SSIDs, my wireless networks. Here it is. Was that easy? It's easy, wasn't it? So this isn't hard. If you want to then write some automation and a bit of Python code to run some of these scripts together, you can either create what we call a runner in Python, where you say, hey, do this one, this one, this one, this one, and it'll do them all together. Or what the other thing Postman can do is it can write your Python for you. Literally write it for you. It is brilliant. You can go to code and look. There's a Python script to do what this API call. I didn't have to write it. Now I've got a Python script. Don't even need to understand it. I just need to know someone's written it. This software's written it for me. So it doesn't have to be hard. Okay, let's say we want to change some information. So this is a SSID called Lab4. It's running in my Mist cloud. Let's have a quick look down at this. Now, what can we see about it in all its details? We can see it's using pre-shared key. I don't know if you can see this at the back, but it's using the password. It's not very secure, is it? I don't mind. So you can all now connect to my Lab4 SSID. That's absolutely fine. But let's say we thought, actually, that's not very secure. I want a more secure password, maybe password 1 or something. Or do you put like an exclamation mark at the end? That makes it all safe, doesn't it? So we want to change that. So what am I going to do? Well, one thing I need to do to change a wireless LAN, I need to know where this wireless LAN exists. What's its unique identifier? Because that's a URL to get all wireless LANs, but what if I want to just update one? So by getting the wireless LANs, I can see its unique ID. It's here. So I'm going to copy it. Copied its unique ID. And now I'm going to go to, look, this one called put edit site wireless LAN. Click on that. And under wireless LAN ID, I need to put the ID that I've just pasted. So I'm now telling it, all it means is that ID is going to be replaced in here where it says wireless LAN ID, okay, in the URL. I could have pasted it in there, but I'm just using a function in Postman where you can have little IDs. The site, I've actually got my site recorded in here. And that's just a variable. If we looked up, I've got some variables here with all the IDs of things I commonly do, and WLP site is in there. Okay, so and that's all that is. So there's my call, ready to go. But I want to change some data. So I go to the body of the call, and I've slightly preset this up, but a little bit of JSON. And you can see, what data do I want to change? Well, I want to make sure the type's PSK, and the PSK for your eyes only. That's a much more secure SSI. Oh, actually, let's make it more secure. Sorry, just a second. There we go, bang at the end. That should do it. And then I'm literally going to click send. And that's it done. Do you believe me? Let's have a look. Let's go to wireless LANs. Let's go to my WLPC. There's lab 4. And the SID has now changed for your eyes only. Simple. It's easy, isn't it, making API calls? It really isn't difficult. We can start to do things and change things fairly simply. Now, so I thought, why not give you a cool demo of automation and API? That's what we're going to try next. And here is my demo. Let me go back to the slides, actually, and we'll talk through this. So I have got with me a little switch. Okay, this is a NOcean, which is an IoT technology, energy harvesting technology. Okay, and it has no battery in it. That's why it's energy harvesting, so it'll always work. The click in off the button, that generates enough energy for it to send a small signal to the NOcean gateway. Okay? So it's completely environmentally friendly. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could have a switch that turned the Wi-Fi on and off? Yeah? So I've got this Wi-Fi on, Wi-Fi off on this button. Okay? Hit it up, it turns the Wi-Fi off, on. So what I want it to do is turn the Wi-Fi on my Mist AP on and off. Okay? But then I thought, how do I know when it's on and off? Well, wouldn't it be great if I've got a light that monitors the wireless LAN and goes green when it's on and red when it's off? That would be really cool. So I thought, why not do that? So let's talk through how this works, and then we'll actually try and do the demo. So this is NOcean technology. And because I want it to be nice and multi-vendor, because it's nice when vendors get on well, isn't it? We've got an Aruba AP here as well, which has my NOcean gateway connected to it. Okay? And then we've got a Mist AP that we're going to actually control. So this is a nice integration process with both Aruba and Mist in the same example. So what happens is when I click a button on here, it is going to send an NOcean IoT message. Now, this is, I don't know how much you know about NOcean, but it's using a ISO standard. It's operating in Europe, at least, in the 800 megahertz frequency band. In the US, it's a 900 megahertz. And so it sends a very low power, low frequency signal. And that's going to be received by this little USB dongle in my Aruba AP. Aruba has an integration with NOcean, which I think is really cool. And what that basically means is it means that this NOcean gateway can now get out and send messages over the Ethernet, over the internet. So that's that's the first thing that's going to happen. I'm going to press a button. It's going to send a message, 800 megahertz frequency, to my USB dongle, and then the Aruba AP will then send, that message will then get forwarded on using a WebSocket API. Okay? To a cloud-based service called Mobus Flow. And Mobus Flow is basically sat there waiting for WebSocket APIs to say statuses of buttons. Okay? Or there's loads of other sensors. This is also an NOcean sensor. I'll talk about this one in a minute. So it's receiving data. Now, Mobus Flow, the server that's running Mobus Flow, is also running a system called Node-RED. And Node-RED is a automation tool, integration automation tool, which allows me to say, hey, and it sends the button clicks into Node-RED. So I can basically get monitoring Node-RED for a button being clicked, and then I can get Node-RED to do something. Because Node-RED, it's a GUI Node-RED. I'm not talking about writing code. Well, I can literally click and drag things. I can say, oh, here's a box to do an API call into Mist. So if a button's clicked, once the button's clicked, then make this API call. And again, I just copied a URL into it. And I just make a GUI flow. I'm going to show you Node-RED in a second. So that's what happens. Node-RED will then make an API call using the REST API. So we've just used the REST API to the Juniper Mist cloud to say, enable the wireless LAN. It's a little bit more complicated than that. I'll show you, because what I very first do is I do an API call to say, give me all the wireless LANs. Then I find out the wireless LAN ID, and then I say, enable the wireless LAN. Because I only trying to do one of the wireless LANs in this demo, not all of them. Okay? If you have a look in the air, you'll probably guess what the SSID is. I'll come back to that in a minute. But simultaneously, while I'm contacting, once I've sent my API call to Juniper, I then send an API call to something called IFTTT. Some of you will know that. If then it's that type of thing. It is a cloud-based integration service, and you can get an account for free. But it's got lots of integrations with lots of different systems, and you can basically say, if this happens from this system, do this to this other system. Okay? That's what it's there to do. It's quite simple. And one of the integrations it's got is with Philips Hue lighting, which is what this is. This is a Philips Hue Zigbee light. So I literally make a call, and I made, with IFTTT, you literally make up a call. So I said, it's going to make a webhook call, and I said, basically monitor for green light. If I send green light, turn my light green. If I say red light, turn my red light. So that's what it's doing. There's two services I've created which are listening for messages. So if I send green light to this service, it will then make an API call to my Zigbee gateway. And that's this little white box here. This is a Zigbee Hue gateway. And it will say, hey, make light number 1 the color green. It will then send a Zigbee message, 2.4 gig band, to my light and say, turn it green. Well, while all of this is going on, of course, the Mist cloud, over its proprietary WebSocket connection it's got with the Mist AP, will be sending a message saying enable wireless LAN. And it will be enabling the wireless LAN. And that is what we're going to try and do. What could go wrong? And of course, to turn the light red, it's almost the same, except we disable wireless LAN and we set the light to green. Now, the wireless LAN is enabled at the moment. Let's take a look at it. You can see there's a wireless LAN called Super Cool Integration Demo. Oh, yeah. So, I'll call it Super Cool, yeah. That's fine. That's because I can spell.
APIs don't spell check for you?
APIs don't spell check for you, no, not yet. So that's it. So this is my super cool integration demo, okay? Now, you can see the wireless LAN I'm connected to. So, and I am pinging, okay? Because I'm connected to the wireless network. So I've got my button. I'm wondering whether, do you want to press a button, Keith? Oh, someone, who wants to press a button? Come on, you can press a button. I'm going to give it to Rob. Rob, do you want to turn off the wireless LAN? Just press the off button, so you're pressing it down. Now, what's happening when he's pressed it? It's making that API call. It's turned my light red. Ooh, the light is red. And my pings have timed out. How cool is that? I've just made this light go red. Go on and turn the wireless LAN on. Look at that, green light. And hopefully my laptop will reconnect to the wireless now as well. But you never know. It'll get there eventually. There we go. And I'm now reconnected. They go to very latest in wireless LAN monitoring technology. Now, that was a fun demo, okay? But what could you really use it for? I did tell you about saving your company 31,000 euros a year, didn't I? That's what I promised at the beginning of this talk, and I've got 4 minutes to do that for you. Okay, so here we go. Let's slide. We were turning off a wireless LAN on and off with a button because it was easy for a demo. But NOcean have loads of sensors. This is actually a multi-sensor. It can detect light, it can detect temperature, vibrations. So what about if we decided to turn wireless LANs on all the radios of our APs off when all the lights in the office went out? Or maybe we could link it to a people count, or we can link it to clocking in and out systems. It could be anything really, but when no one's in the office, we turn the wireless LANs off. Okay? That would be a good potential use, especially when you consider Wi-Fi 6E access points that maybe have 4 radios, because they've got a monitor radio as well, could be consuming 29.3 watts of power. That's what one of the leading Wi-Fi 6E access points consumes. Now, let's say you had 500 access points deployed in your office, your campus, okay? You've got 500 access points. I've done a bit calculations. That would mean they were consuming 14,650 watts of power. Now, and again, these are very rough calculations done on a power calculator online. I'm not saying these are 100% accurate, but they're probably somewhere right. If your working hours were 7 till 7, let's say, 7 a.m. till 7 p.m., so there was 12 hours a day when no one was there, it would be costing you 68 euros a day to keep your APs on when nobody was in the office. Your 500 APs. If you also have no one in at the weekend, so it's just Monday to Friday, over a week, it would be costing you 612 euros a week to keep your APs on. Over a year, it would be costing you 31,824 euros to keep your APs on. So if you could turn them off automatically when no one was in the building, you could save your company 31,824 euros. You would be an environmental hero. It would be good for your company's green policy and everyone would be happy. So for a small sensor, saving £31,000 a year, is it worth learning about automation and integration? That's what I'm leaving you with. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.